Good day, everybody, and welcome to a new episode about buying property basics in Malaysia. Today, we're going to go a bit off topic. We're not going to really talk about property per se, but because I find a lot of the feedback from you guys on YouTube is that more on living queries, lifestyle queries. That means if you were to buy property in Malaysia, how do you live there? Our video on the 5 visas in Malaysia was very popular. So I think today we're going to talk a bit about if you're going to choose to live in Malaysia, whether as a weekend home or a second home, right? What are the things that you can take advantage of in Malaysia to make your lifestyle much more enjoyable and better? So today's video is going to be about 10 popular things in Malaysia that are cheaper than Singapore. So the first one, of course, is food, right? So here we're referring to cooked food, right? If you eat outside in the restaurants or in hawker centers in Malaysia. So are they cheaper than Singapore? Generally speaking, yes, but not by much. Cheaper, maybe 10, 20%. It all depends on what you're eating and where. So if you're going to eat like high-end food, like in restaurants, right, in Malaysia, I think if you ask me personally, I don't think the prices are very much different from Singapore. Like for like, that means for the items that you're going to get, right? I think Malaysia restaurant prices high-end restaurants, like we're talking about chains, right? Like KFC or those so-called branded restaurants, right? They are not necessarily cheaper than Singapore. Even if they're cheaper, not cheaper by much, right? It also depends on where you're eating, right? Like if you even if you go to hawker, right, a typical bowl of noodles will be what 6, 7 ringgit, right? If you convert back to Sing dollars, it's not very much cheaper. Um, so the other thing that will factor actually whether it's cheap or not is where you eat, right? If you're going to eat in the JB Johor Bahru town center itself, then of course prices are higher. If you can go to the suburbs, right, or the heartlands, right, or even more semi-rural, a bit kampong area, you will find that prices can go down quite a fair bit. So that's my opinion on food, right? Cheaper, yes, but not by much. 10-20% maybe. Again, it varies differently on location and which places you're going to go eat. Number two, groceries at the supermarket. Now, this is quite popular. A lot of Singaporeans like to go to Malaysia to buy groceries at the supermarkets, right? Are they cheaper? Again, if you ask me, by and large, it's cheaper, but not by much. Rule of thumb, about 10-20% cheaper than Singapore, right? And maybe these are also for products which are made in Malaysia itself, right? For example, like tissue paper, right? Or cooking oil, right? So Malaysia produces a lot of cooking oil because we got a lot of palm oil trees, right? Cooking tissue paper also. I think I find that tissue paper also there's a lot of factories in Malaysia that make tissue paper, so cheaper as well. Local vegetables that are grown in Malaysia, right, in Cameron Highlands or in local parts of Malaysia, these are also cheaper than Singapore, where you will see a good price difference. But if you're going to buy like imported items, for example, wine, right? Wine comes from Italy or France or wherever, right? These will not be cheaper than Singapore, probably the same price, maybe even more expensive. And a lot of imported products also you may not have as much choice as Singapore. So Singapore, because of a higher foreigner population, they may have higher choices of imported products. So in Malaysia, if you're going to buy groceries in Malaysia, you're going to look out for local items that are made in Malaysia. Definitely, they will be cheaper than Singapore. But again, in my opinion, not by much, 10-20% in general. Three is cars or petrol. So one thing I like to recommend to Singaporeans who are going to live in Malaysia for some time is typically to buy a car, right? Because in Malaysia, one of the benefits of life is to be able to drive a car around, right? In Singapore, cars are expensive, right? So there's no COE in Malaysia. If you buy a car in Malaysia, the car is freehold, right? Unlike Singapore car, which is a 10-year leasehold, right? Yeah, it's a joke that I always have. So Malaysia cars are freehold. You can buy second-hand car, you can buy first-hand car, you can take a loan also if you want. If you buy a Malaysian car, and drive a Malaysian car, I believe you need to get a international driving license, which you can do at any road transport authority office, right? If you drive Singaporean car, no need. But I think if you're going to buy a Malaysian car, I believe you need to have a local driving license, right? Which is an international license, which you can use your Singapore license to apply, right? And cars are cheap, right? You can buy second-hand cars for as low as 20-30,000 ringgit, right? Depends on the model, of course, and things like that. But I mean, if you're going to be in JB, you need just a simple city car, right? The Perodua Myvi, very popular car. 20-30,000 ringgit you can buy already, right? And it's freehold, and it's a great car that you can get around JB quite easily in a car like that. So, and of course, one of the great parts of buying a car in Malaysia is you can travel to other states, right? Malacca, other parts of Johor, KL, right? And it's fun, right, to have a car, right? So I normally recommend if you're going to come from Singapore, you can park your Malaysia car in your Malaysia house, right? Then you from Singapore travel. Then once you get to your house, right, you may have to take Grab or taxi lah to get to your house in JB. Right from there, then you have a car to travel around in Malaysia, and I think it's lots of fun, right? I recommend every Singaporean who's gonna spend some time in JB to do that. Buy a Malaysian car and use it, right? I'm sure that will enjoy and improve the quality of your life in Malaysia quite a fair bit. The next one, of course, is petrol, right? In Malaysia, as a foreigner, you can only buy the RON 97 petrol, right, which is 3 ringgit 35 cents per liter. I repeat, 3 ringgit 35 cents per liter, right? So that's about $1 Sing. So that's like what, 50%? No, is it 50%? Yeah, 50% cheaper than Singapore, right? And some more you're getting 97. No, I think Singapore, if you're going to pay $2 plus, you only get the 92 or 90, yeah, 92 or 93, right? So in Singapore, in Malaysia, you pay 50% cheaper, you get RON 97, a much better quality petrol, right? So petrol is a lot cheaper, which is one reason why a lot of Singaporeans like to go to JB to pump petrol, right? Because half price, yeah, half price. So that makes a very big difference to your budget, right? If you drive a Malaysia registered car and you are Malaysian, you can actually get the Malaysian petrol price, which is the RON 95. That's a lot cheaper at about 2 ringgit and 5 cents, right? So if you are a Malaysian or have a Malaysian spouse, right, you can do that. Pump the RON 95, which again 1 ringgit per liter cheaper, right? So so yeah, so car driving is definitely one of the fun things to enjoy. If you're someone in Singapore who always find that it's quite expensive to own a car in Singapore, but you can get a driving license, buy a car in Malaysia. You can only drive it in Malaysia, so you cannot drive Malaysian car in Singapore. A Singaporean cannot drive Malaysian car in Singapore, right? But drive it in Malaysia, I think you will enjoy that quite a fair bit. Number 4, milk powder. So for those of you who have kids or young kids, right, milk powder is definitely cheaper in Malaysia, right? People ask me, is the production quality different? There are some differences, but I mean, from my experience with people in industry, I mean, it still works fine for kids, right? Some people ask me, is it milk powder in Malaysia lousier or something? I mean, there are some differences in the way they make it, right? But a lot of people in Singapore buy milk powder in Malaysia to drink in Singapore. Is quite safe, I can assure you. And again, cheaper, how much cheaper? A lot, yeah. It's cheaper by 40-50%. Again, differs on the brand that you are buying and the quantities that you're buying, because you buy more, you get cheaper, right? So anywhere from 40-50% cheaper is possible for milk powder, right? And I do it myself. I buy milk powder from Malaysia for my kids in Singapore, right? There are some Singapore companies who make milk powder in Malaysia as well. So yeah, don't worry about it. So milk powder from all ages, yeah, from babies until kids, all right? There's a wide range of milk powder to buy. So one thing for families who are trying to save costs, right? For children that you have, right? Buy milk powder in Malaysia. Number 5, diapers, right? Again, similar topic for those of you who have parents who are parents with kids, right? Diapers in Malaysia also cheaper. Again, not by much, around 10-20%. Again, differs by brand and the quantity that you're buying. But again, there's a lot of people who do the same thing. So if you're going to buy milk powder, you must well buy diapers as well, right? Go in one shot, buy the diapers and the milk powder one shot. And cheaper, how much cheaper? Around 10-20% diapers in Malaysia. Yeah, so that's another savings for those of you who have kids. Number 6, which is quite important, prescription drugs. Now in Singapore, there are certain drugs that you cannot buy off the pharmacy. You have to get a prescription from the doctor, right? And then you can only buy the drugs. So this is normally quite troublesome, especially if you have medicine that you need to eat on a regular basis. So you can buy one shot 3 months, and after 3 months you have to go back to the doctor again to get prescription. So it's very troublesome to do this in Singapore, because these medicines are not found at the pharmacy. You need to go to a doctor to get it. But in Malaysia, some of these medicines that typically a lot of people use, they are available in the pharmacy in Malaysia. So it's very common to see that people go into JB, to Johor, to buy drugs for their own use. And not only is available to buy over pharmacy, which saves you a lot of time and trouble, you can buy cheaper. Okay, cheaper how much? Again, cheaper by half. So we're talking about generic drugs, typically like for high blood pressure lah, high cholesterol lah, this kind of stuff that you eat maybe 1 month you eat every day eat one, that kind of drugs, right? Typically for older people or some people who have a bit of minor health concern, right? So another example would be like, if they got high blood pressure and stuff like that. So this kind of drugs you can go and buy in Malaysia pharmacy. So you just need to have the drug name, right? You go to Malaysia pharmacy, you can buy them, right? So as I said, save you a lot of trouble to buy this in JB. Cheaper, as well as save you the trouble of going to a doctor in Singapore to get. Just go to a JB and buy. So I've met people who say they one shot go to JB, buy 3-6 months worth of these prescription drugs, right, to bring back for their parents in Singapore to eat. Yeah. Number 7, medical services. So in Singapore, I don't know, if you ask me, in Singapore, it's quite a big problem. Whenever I go to clinic, right, clinic queue in Singapore is damn long. I don't understand why is it not enough clinic, or a lot of people in Singapore like to get MC, right? But clinic queues in Singapore are fairly long. They are not as long in Malaysia. I mean, for some reason, these kind of queues don't really exist in clinics in Malaysia. There are a lot of clinics in Malaysia who have much shorter queues, or no queue sometimes, right? So if you go to clinic in Malaysia, it's a lot easier to get to see a doctor quickly, right? Number 2 is that if you are looking at more serious procedures, right, medical procedures, right, as I mentioned in some of my TikTok videos, you can use your MediSave in select private hospitals in Malaysia. I repeat, you can use your MediSave, your Singapore MediSave, for selected private hospitals in Malaysia. So typically, who are they? These are all the Singapore recognized hospitals, are like Gleneagles. So there's a Gleneagles in Johor. There's also a Regency Hospital in Johor. Both these are owned by Singapore companies actually, right? Parkway and Regency is owned by HMI, which is listed in Singapore. So both of these companies in Singapore, they actually have hospital in JB. So Singapore government recognize if you go to these hospitals, you can get MediSave. You can use MediSave for this cost there. So not only cheaper, yeah, because medical cost in Malaysia is generally cheaper. Cheaper how much? Again, depends, in my experience, anywhere from 30% to 70%, depending on procedure, what you're talking about, right? We have seen even people go to JB to give birth, also got, right? Yeah, no, go JB to give birth, because cheaper, right? So Singapore hospital, expensive, so go to JB hospital to give birth. So things which are not urgent, right, that you can schedule, typically is smart money to use your MediSave and do it in JB cheaper, right? So it doesn't affect your cash, right? So yeah, again, I repeat, MediSave can be used in selected private hospitals in Johor. The two most common ones are the Gleneagles in Medini, which is just opposite Legoland, and Regency Hospital, which is in Pasir Gudang, right? Both these are quite popular with Singaporeans to use MediSave. Number 8, somewhat related to number 7, dental services. Like for myself, I use quite a lot of dental services. I mean, my teeth has always been an issue for me. So if you want to do like, teeth scaling, cleaning, whitening, tooth removal, things like that, braces, right? You do in Malaysia, right? Easily half price. Easily half price, okay? Maybe more. I mean, depend on the clinic and what procedure exactly that you're doing. But I find that it's extremely smart to do it in Malaysia than in Singapore. Unless you damn urgent, you cannot tahan already, right? The pain is damn pain, right? Then you do it in Singapore. Lah. Number 9, services in general, right? When I say services in general, means you're not actually buying anything, you're buying a service. So what kind of services I'm talking about? For women, hair, doing up your hair, doing up your nails, right? A lot of people like to do this in Malaysia. If you go to Malaysian malls, right, in Johor, right, KSL or Bukit Indah or in City Square, it's very popular for these hair salons, nail salons to go for Malaysian to Singaporean clients, and they're definitely cheaper in Singapore. Anywhere from 30 to 50% cheaper. And people tend to ask me, is it better? Is it good quality, right? Because services sometimes quality is important. To me, is in Singapore you can definitely get better quality, but you're going to pay like double or 50% more, right, for maybe additional 10% quality, right? So to me, is, are you willing to pay so much more money for just another 10% quality? You know what I mean? Yes, in Singapore, there are services in Singapore that can be very good, better than Malaysia, right? But the premium is also pretty high as well. Similarly with medical services, I mean, if I didn't cover that in my earlier point, right? Same thing, are doctors in Malaysia worse off than Singapore? I mean, it's not about doctors. I mean, a lot of doctors are inherently minimum qualified is there. But in Singapore, again, for hospital care or similar the services I'm talking about here, are you willing to pay like so much more money for maybe a 10% difference in benefit? So it all depends. I mean, if you got the money, then yeah, by all means, go ahead, do it in Singapore, right? If you have time and if you want to have a bit of save a lot of cost, but get quite most of the benefits there. A lot of these services, like I said, hair, nails for women, very popular in Malaysia to do it cheaper, right? In Malaysia for this, right? Other things that like for men, to me, it's a haircut, right? You can get a haircut in Malaysia today. I think the running rate round is about 15 ringgit, right? So cheaper than Singapore. Car wash, right? Also cheaper than Singapore. Car wash in Malaysia now is about 10, 12 ringgit. So definitely cheaper than Singapore. Singapore, I think, is what, $7 or $10 today, right? Other things will be also like car maintenance, right? You want to do your car checkup, right? Replace your black oil, right? Do car servicing, right? Definitely cheaper than Singapore, right? Easily half price or more, right? That's the reason why there's a lot of car shops in Johor, right? I don't know if you notice this if you drive around. There's a lot of car servicing shops in Johor because they cater to a lot of the Singaporean crowd, because it's definitely cheaper to do in Malaysia. In fact, a lot of car repair shops in Singapore are all staffed by Malaysians, right? So they come over to do car repairs, car servicing in Singapore. But you can do it in Malaysia as well. A lot of them supply parts to each other, right? And yeah, so Malaysia definitely cheaper in Singapore. Also for car maintenance for men, I can talk about massage and all that also. But yeah, that's I won't go into that into detail. Yeah, so services, right? Like I said, hair, nails for women, for men, haircut, car servicing, right? Car wash, right? These things are definitely cheaper in Malaysia. You get a lot of value for the money that you pay. Number 10, of course, comes back to my topic, which is property, right? So definitely property in Malaysia is cheaper. I think everybody knows that. Rental cheaper, buying cheaper, right? You can, and I think in Singapore, one of the highest living costs in Singapore, of course, is your rent or your repayment to your property mortgage, right? So if you can make the move to Malaysia, definitely you save a lot of money here on your rental and on your property repayment, right? Because it's in a lot cheaper. Property prices are a lot cheaper in Malaysia, right? And especially if you're in a scenario where you have a fully paid off HDB in Singapore, we see that with a lot of older Singaporeans who have fully paid off HDB because they buy the HDB in the 80s or 90s. By now they already fully paid off. So what these people do is they rent out the HDB in Singapore, they collect the 3,000-4,000 Sing dollars, and from there they take that money to subsidize their living in Malaysia, right? So they may still stay their kids, right? Because kids got their own kids, so they help to take care of the kids. At the same time, their free time they go to JB, right, to have a second home there and enjoy life, right? And they make the most of it, right, of their property, the low property prices in JB and the high property prices in Singapore. So use that arbitrage, right, to enjoy a great lifestyle there. So I hope this video was useful. 10 popular things in Malaysia, Johor, that are cheaper than Singapore that I'm sure that you want to enjoy. And I hope that this encourages you to consider living in Malaysia, consider to buy property or rent property in Johor, and have a great life out there for all of you. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, do like, share, subscribe on my YouTube channel. You can look at the description of this video for our links to our MailChimp, for our email mailing list, for our TikTok, right? We get a lot of content there as well, out to people, so different formats, contents. You can join all of it. We will have some talks, I think, in next few months to try and meet you guys face to face. So thank you very much. If you need any property services in Malaysia, do let me know. I'm a licensed property agent in both Singapore and Malaysia, so we do help a lot of clients to do their property service needs as well here. Thank you very much. Bye bye.